In late October 2025, the ancient town of Hoi An, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in central Vietnam, was engulfed by one of the most severe floods in decades. Triggered by relentless rainfall and upstream dam discharges, the Hoai River surged beyond its banks, inundating homes, markets, and centuries-old streets. The disaster has left a trail of destruction, displaced thousands, and prompted urgent calls for infrastructure resilience and climate adaptation. Between October 26th and 27th, Hoi An experienced over 1,000 millimeters of rainfall in just 24 hours. This deluge, combined with floodwater released from hydroelectric reservoirs upstream, caused the Hoai River to swell rapidly. By October 27th, central streets such as Bach Dang, Nguyen Thai Hoc, and Nguyen Phuc Chu were submerged under 1 to 1.5 meters of muddy water. The water infiltrated homes, shops, and cultural landmarks, turning the historic town into a network of canals. Authorities reported that the river reached a 60-year high, transforming Hoi An's picturesque alleys into waterways navigable only by boat. Residents scrambled to protect their belongings, stacking sandbags and evacuating to higher ground. Tourists were guided out of flooded zones, and emergency crews worked around the clock to erect warning signs and assist with evacuations. The flood's impact was both physical and emotional. More than 116,000 homes across central Vietnam were inundated, with Hoi An among the hardest hit. Entire neighborhoods were submerged, and in some areas, water reached rooftops. The historic architecture, wooden houses, temples, and bridges suffered extensive damage, raising concerns about long-term preservation. Markets such as Hoi An Central Market and the An Hoi Bridge were overwhelmed by fast-moving water. Residents used boats to navigate flooded streets, while others waded through waist-deep currents to salvage possessions. The flood disrupted power supplies, damaged roads and rail lines, and isolated several communities. As of October 31st, at least 13 people were confirmed dead, and 11 others remained missing across central Vietnam. The government deployed rescue teams, boats, and medical aid to affected areas. In Hoi An, local authorities coordinated with disaster response units to evacuate vulnerable populations and provide temporary shelter. The flood coincided with Vietnam's storm season, which typically spans June to October. However, the intensity and scale of this event far exceeded expectations, prompting renewed scrutiny of flood management systems and climate resilience strategies. Hoi An's economy, heavily reliant on tourism, has been severely disrupted. The town, once a bustling trading port from the 15th to 19th centuries, draws millions of visitors annually for its lantern-lit streets, preserved architecture, and culinary heritage. With streets underwater and businesses shuttered, the tourism sector faces a prolonged recovery. Cultural preservationists are assessing damage to heritage sites, including ancient houses and temples. The flood has reignited debates about balancing tourism development with environmental sustainability and disaster preparedness. Experts warn that climate change is intensifying Vietnam's vulnerability to extreme weather. Rising sea levels, erratic rainfall patterns, and aging infrastructure compound the risks. Hydroelectric dam management also came under scrutiny, as flood discharges from upstream reservoirs contributed to the surge. Calls for transparent coordination between dam operators and local governments are growing louder. Residents described the flood as both terrifying and surreal. "We've seen floods before, but never like this," said one shop owner near Bach Dang Street. "The water came so fast. We barely had time to move anything." Tourists caught in the flood recounted being escorted out by boat. "It was like Venice, but with panic," said a traveler from Australia. The locals were incredibly helpful, even as they faced their own losses. By October 31st, floodwaters began to recede, revealing layers of mud, debris, and damage. Cleanup operations commenced, with volunteers, residents, and municipal workers joining forces. Restoration of power, sanitation, and transport is underway, but full recovery may take months. The flood has sparked national reflection on disaster preparedness, heritage protection, and climate adaptation. For Hoi An, the challenge lies not only in rebuilding but in reimagining a future where its cultural legacy can withstand the forces of nature. Photos and drone footage circulating on state media and international outlets show haunting scenes. Lanterns floating in floodwater, boats navigating submerged alleys, and rooftops barely visible above the current. These images have galvanized support and donations from across Vietnam and abroad. Authorities have begun cleanup and recovery operations to stabilize daily life, protect cultural assets, and support the tourism economy that underpins much of Quang Nam and Thua Thien Hue provinces. Government agencies have moved to finance emergency relief and infrastructure repairs while national tourism officials compile guidance for travelers and businesses to plan safely and resume operations in phases. Central Vietnam is in its peak storm season, and meteorological authorities report continued unsettled conditions over the central coast and offshore areas. Travelers should expect intermittent heavy rain, localized flooding, and short-notice transport changes while river levels normalize. Official forecasts note episodes of strong winds and rough seas that can affect ferry operations and coastal excursions. Monitoring updates before travel is essential. The government has released targeted funds to flood-affected central provinces to restore essential services, reinforce riverbanks and public works, and accelerate reopening. This financing is designed to reduce downtime for transport corridors and community facilities that serve both residents and visitors, a critical step for heritage towns whose economies are tourism-reliant. Additional national directives have called for stronger disaster preparedness and rapid restoration of disrupted infrastructure to protect livelihoods and visitor flows. Hoi, an ancient town, and Hue's Heritage Core have seen prolonged inundation of riverfront quarters, affecting walking streets, riverside boutiques, cafes, and homestays. Meanwhile, more than 22,100 houses remain inundated, mainly in Hue and Da Nang cities. Floods and landslides have destroyed or swept away 91 houses and damaged 181 others, according to the report. About 245,000 households are still out of power in the region, mostly in Da Nang with more than 225,000 affected. A total of 80 sites on national highways are blocked or disrupted due to landslides. Flooding is forecast to persist for another 1 to 2 days in the region, the report said. The death toll from heavy rains and flooding in Vietnam's central region has risen to 28, with 6 people missing and 43 others injured, local daily VN Express reported Friday night. According to local media, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh held an online meeting this morning to direct response and recovery efforts. We must reach isolated areas and ensure people have food, drinking water, and essential supplies. No one should be left hungry or cold, he said. The U.S. Embassy in Vietnam said, heavy rains and flooding continue to impact central Vietnam as a result of tropical depression Phong. The U.S. Embassy and consulate in Vietnam urge all U.S. citizens affected by the floods to maintain caution and follow the directions of local authorities. Additionally, the Vietnamese National Center for Hydrometeorological Forecasting predicts that heavy to very heavy rainfall will continue through Thursday night, from southern Quang Tri to Da Nang, bordering Hue to the north and south, and the eastern part of Quang Nai to the south of Da Nang. As a result of these rains, residents should expect continued risk of flooding, flash floods, and landslides. Flash floods have wreaked havoc across central Vietnam, submerging and damaging around 4,871 hectares of rice and crops, according to the Vietnam Disaster and Dike Management Authority under the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment, MAE, and the Vietnam News Agency, VNA, correspondents in affected localities. Lam Dong Province suffered the heaviest losses with 3,877 hectares of crops damaged. Across the central region, 790 hectares of fruit trees were affected, while more than 17,700 livestock and poultry were reported dead or washed away. In Quang Tri Province, several areas faced serious inundation and landslides, though traffic on Provincial Road 571 was restored on October 30th. In Hue City, 38 landslide sites were recorded, some severe, along with blockages on the western branch of the Ho Chi Minh Road and provincial routes, where floodwaters are now receding. Da Nang reported damage to nearly 1.9 kilometers of roads and about 62,845 cbm of landslide debris along national and rural routes. In Quang Nai Province, over 200 landslide sites spilled some 60,000 cbm of soil and rocks onto roads, damaging 80 communal routes and disrupting passenger train services. Around 438,000 customers in 109 communes and wards across 4 provinces and cities remain without electricity. Relevant ministries and localities have been directed to take urgent, coordinated measures to address the aftermath, ensure food, water, and medicine reach isolated areas, and relocate displaced families. Authorities are also tasked with assessing damage to crops, property, and infrastructure, and mobilizing all available resources to restore livelihoods and essential services, with priority given to schools, healthcare facilities, electricity, and telecommunications networks, as well as sanitation to prevent post-flood disease outbreaks. The MAE has instructed localities to swiftly restore agricultural production and minimize long-term impacts on the sector. Provinces have been asked to complete assessments and propose food aid for affected households by November 1st, ensuring timely support and stabilization of people's lives.